Rico Dowdle told him to buckle up, and the Cowboys, well, they weren't buckled.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube, where I am live right here from the Panthers press box following their 30-27 walk-off win against the Dallas Cowboys. I am live here on YouTube following every single Carolina Panthers game. So if you ever miss an episode on YouTube, go check it out wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And of course, it'll be here on YouTube in your feeds. This episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. The Carolina Panthers 30, the Dallas Cowboys 27. The Panthers are 500 for the first time since week 10 of the 2021 season. They are undefeated so far this season in 2025 at home, and they get a win against the Cowboys, a team that I know every single one of you loves to see lose in this building, as their fans always show up to Bank of America Stadium. And it seems like in recent years, no, not last year, but they've been losing a lot when they come here to Charlotte. A big win for Dave Canales, for Bryce Young, for Rico Dowdle, for the Carolina Panthers organization, and now they have won back-to-back games. Next week, they head up to New York to face off against the Jets. We'll talk more about that later. The defense stepped up again late in the game to get it done. But the story of this game, much like the story of the game last week against Miami, is Rico Dowdle, who was outstanding yet again for Carolina, filling in for Chuba Hubbard, who was out for the second straight week of a calf injury, not the same calf that kept him out the final couple of games last season in 2024. It's the other one, but they haven't needed Chuba the last couple of weeks, because they've had Rico being able to go out there, run for 206 yards last week. That's second most in a single game by a Panthers running back in franchise history. Then today, he led the way with 183 yards on the ground on 30 carries. Also led Carolina in receiving with 4 receptions, 56 yards, and a touchdown. Matter of fact, he set a Panthers single game franchise record for yards from scrimmage with 239 yards. The previous record was held by Christian McCaffrey, who had 237 yards from scrimmage twice as a Carolina Panther a couple of years ago. But Rico Dowdle, in his second game starting back in his home state, his home region, goes out there and set the single game record for yards from scrimmage. And he's just been amazing. Like, we don't need to have the conversation about what things look like once Chuba Hubbard comes back here and how the split's going to be. I'm just going to stick to what Tetero McMillan told us after the game. The tape doesn't lie. And the tape is showing you right now that over the last 2 weeks that Rico Dowdle is a stud. And that Rico Dowdle, whether Chuba Hubbard's out there or not, deserves to continue to get a ton of carries and to be a main part of this offense moving forward for Carolina. He was excellent today. He was. And he told the Cowboys last Sunday, after running for 206 yards against Miami, wasn't even celebrating the win. He was focused on his old team. He told them to buckle up. Brian Schottenheimer, the head coach there in Dallas, he said that they'd be buckled. And after this game, after he went off for 183 yards on the ground, 56 yards through the air, 239 yards overall, he told them they weren't buckled. The Cowboys were not buckled. They were not prepared for Rico Dowdle on this day. And it's not surprising that he had another big day. Dallas was dead last in the NFL coming into this game in rushing success rate defensively. They have not stopped the run this season. Carolina's had success recently, especially last week, and then today getting it done on the ground, which with Rico Dowdle leading the way. And also got to give a shout out to the offensive line. And that's something that I think it's lost oftentimes. You go back to last week, Brady Christensen, he was stepping in at right guard as Chandler Zavala was injured. He went on IR. And then you also had a situation where obviously Robert Hunt, he's done probably for the season. Last week, it was 216 yards overall Today, 239 yards, or sorry, today was 216 yards overall with 5.7 yards per carry, while last week against Miami, 239 yards overall for Carolina, 7.5 yards per carry. And that's with Brady Christensen in there. That's with Cade Mays in there. That's with Josh Nyman in there, missing Austin Corbett, missing Robert Hunt, missing Taylor Moton, and they're able to still road grade against the Dolphins and against the Cowboys and to not have any sort of drop-off. They've had 5 different starting offensive line combinations so far this season in Carolina. When that was happening back in 2021, the last time they were able to go out there and to be 500, that was a season that was a disaster because of the injuries. But with the entire group from last season coming back this year, having a continuity, we have not seen that drop off, whether it's been in run blocking and pass protection. This has continued to be a solid unit for Carolina and to pave the way for who's turning out to be an excellent back for the Panthers this season in Rico Dowdle. I know a lot of us expected that when Rico came to Carolina to team up with Chuba Hubbard, that the Panthers would run the ball effectively. And for whatever reason, early on this season, whether it was them getting behind too early, Dave Canales getting away from the run, maybe not blocking the way they needed to up front, they weren't able to do what a lot of people hoped they would do with Rico and with Chuba. But the last 2 weeks with Rico as a feature back, they have done that. So again, it's a conversation for another day as far as what the carry split will be once Chuba's back in there. Right now, I'm just going to focus on how well Rico Dowdle is carrying the ball until Chuba Hubbard and the Panthers strength and conditioning staff and training staff that let him take his time. Because currently, they don't need him. And I would hope that next week, going up to New York to face off against the Jets, that they will not need Chuba Hubbard in that game at all. Rico's here for likely only 1 season. And Chuba has still 4 more years left on his deal, or 3 more years after this left on his deal. We don't know what his future is going to be. We know Chuba's future is going to be here in Carolina. Maybe Rico comes back next year. Unlikely, but we'll see. And I was talking to a Cowboys reporter before the game just about Rico, what he had said. And he was saying, I don't really understand why Rico's upset. You know, Dallas wanted to give him only about $1-2 million. He was looking for $6 million. Well, he showed you today why he was upset. He showed you last week why he felt like he deserved more money than what Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, and the Cowboys organization were willing to give him. And, well, their guy, Javonte Williams, who I love, former North Carolina Tar Heel, former North Carolina native, he wasn't getting it done on the ground like Rico Dowdle was today. So an excellent day again for Rico. And also shout out to Bryce Young. I had someone ask me this question on the weekly Wednesday mailbag this past week. Again, at me or DM me over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council right now to get your questions in for this week's edition of the show. I had somebody ask me, hey, is Bryce Young clutch after the fourth quarter comeback and game-winning drive that he was able to orchestrate last week against Miami in a game where Bryce certainly showed you a lot of the things that you don't like to see from him and a lot of things that make you question whether he can be a franchise quarterback. But then he makes the big 4th down play, finding Tedero McMillan, the nice trust throw that Xavier Legette called it to find him for that touchdown, the throw to Jimmy Horn Jr. on that 4th down, the throw to Legette early on that game-winning drive as well, then the touchdown throw to Mitchell Evans. When they needed Bryce to make plays, he made those plays last week. And then again today, when they needed him to make plays, he was able to get them down the field and to win this game in what was a shootout. And I know going to the week, Panthers had to have thought that in order to win this game against the number 1 offense in the league, Dak Prescott playing at a supposed MVP level, that they were going to have to put points on the board. And they did that offensively today, again, scoring 30 points in this walk-off victory. And now Bryce Young has 5 fourth-quarter comebacks, 8 game-winning drives in his career, the second occurrence in as many weeks with the fourth-quarter comebacks and the game-winning drives. And you look at the pinpoint throw that he had there on that 4th and 3, Dave Canales sitting there in no man's land on the 40-yard line, a little bit too far for them to want to kick the ball. Ryan Fitzgerald, who made a 55-yarder earlier in the game, the wind was in his face in this situation, but also you got to go out there and run down the clock. When you have Brandon Aubrey on the other sideline there for Dallas, you can probably make a 70-yarder and that would be going with the wind. There's no way that you punt in that situation or even attempt to kick in that situation and possibly miss. And obviously they go for it and Bryce finds Hunter Renfrow. You look at the replay. on that quick slant. There was a linebacker who was just a millisecond behind that. And if the ball's not on time, if the ball's not accurate, that's not caught. That's not a first down. And in Carolina is likely going to lose this game. But instead, Bryce is right there on time to Hunter Renfrow, who makes a big play, his only catch of the day. You look earlier in the fourth quarter, he was able to shake off a defender, had a defender draped all over him, shakes him off, and then finds Terrell McMillan for a 2-yard touchdown on that drive. He stepped up earlier there in the third quarter to find Rico Dowdle wide open down the sideline for that touchdown. And I saw this put out there by Pro Football Focus PFF that when Bryce Young and the Panthers were trailing the Cowboys today, he was 10 of 10 for 125 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and a 158.3 perfect passer rating. The guy was nails from behind against a bad Cowboys defense, I understand, but he got the job done yet again. He really frustrated you earlier in the game last week against Miami, but then he was able to turn around and make the plays necessary. In this game, all throughout the day, he took care of the football. The one turnover was not on him at all. He got it done yet again. I had somebody hit me up about the stats I've been thrown out there in recent times because I'm just observing a lot of times and looking at how the passing offense has factored as long as Bryce has been the quarterback here. And look, when they turn the ball over, when Bryce does, Panthers typically don't win. The last 2 weeks they're now 3-18 whenever Bryce Young has a turnover, understanding that the turnover today was not on him at all. And then when he's thrown for less than 200 yards, which he's done again for the last 2 weeks, they are now 7-15 in those games, winning back-to-back games. Last week against Miami at home, today against the Cowboys at home. And most importantly, they got the W. They're 3-3. They're 500. Bryce Young is showing you the things that you want to see from him. And apparently, he's pretty damn clutch, according to Kurt, who asked that question on Wednesday. And then someone hit me up in my DMs there on Twitter today about Bryce's clutchness. He now has 5 fourth-quarter comebacks, 8 game-winning drives in his career. And finally, offensively, shout out to Terrell McMillan, who went out there and finally got on the board with 2 touchdowns today, both of them where he was wide open. Finally, he's able to get that done. And he was a guy who wasn't asking for the ball in those situations, was not saying, oh, man, why don't I have a touchdown? What's going on here? And Brad Idzik was asked about that. The Panthers OC was asked about that on Thursday morning during our weekly Zoom conversation with him. And he said, nah, man, T-Mac's just going out there, doing his job, playing his role. Of course, he's going to be itching for the touchdown, but he's not vocalizing, hey, when am I going to get mine? He's just doing what he needed to do. And yet again, was able to do that today in this game. And what really impressed me the most was on that Bryce Young interception, which really, when you look at PFF, when they talk about turnover-worthy plays, that will not be one. That will be on T-Mac. It went right through his hands and into the arms of the Cowboys defender on that play. He came back the next drive, and it's not just a touchdown reception that he had. 2 plays before that, Rico Dowdle had a 12-yard rushing attempt, and that was led by T-Mac being able to pick up his block and drive that guy towards the sideline. So to be able to do his job in that situation, then get rewarded later on with a 19-yard touchdown, that to me was really impressive. Yes, you had the bad situation where you dropped it, went to the defender, tip drill. You can't have that happen, but to come back to erase that by scoring not once but twice, to be a part of the blocking assignments there, to pave the way. It's not just the offensive line, it's also the receivers. Xavier Legette last week was excellent. I'm sure upon film review was excellent again in this game. Bryson Tremaine, who came in certain situations, was great in helping open up some holes. Damian Lewis, my God, I know he's not a wide receiver. My Lord, that guy was awesome today. And also Terrell McMillan getting it done. So overall, offensively, everything I wanted to see from this team today, aside from the turnover, of course, but the way that they were able to control the time of possession on the ground, especially at the end of that game, running out the clock, not giving it back to Dak and Dallas, and be able to not have any drop off there with Josh Nijman stepping in there at right tackle with Taylor Moton out with an elbow injury, and for Bryce Young to once again show his ability to go down there in the fourth quarter, come back, win the game. A lot of credit to the Panthers offense, being able to win this shootout 30-27 here at home inside Bank of America Stadium against the Cowboys, now sitting at 3-3. But it's not just the offense. The defense also, for the second week in a row. And I know they give up a lot of points, give us some big plays. They deserve their flowers because when they needed to stop, they got it. Last week they needed to stop. They got it. This week they did it again. We'll talk more about the Panthers defense, reflect on this 30-27 win against Dallas here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. You know the saying, look good, feel good. The problem is that most dress clothes only check one of those boxes. They look sharp but feel stiff, hot, and high maintenance. That's why there's Mizzen and Main. Mizzen and Main makes classic menswear with performance fabric, so it's effortless to look sharp and feel comfortable. They actually invented the performance fabric dress shirt over 10 years ago, and they perfected it ever since. Their shirts are stretchy, moisture-wicking, wrinkle-resistant, and machine-washable. No ironing, no dry cleaning. I love that you can go from the office to dinner or even out on the golf course and still feel comfortable all day. It's the feel of athletic wear, but the look of professional menswear. Right now, Mizzen & Main is offering our listeners 20% off your first purchase at mizzenandmain.com with promo code LOCKEDONNFL20. That's Mizzen, spelled M-I-Z-Z-E-N, and Main, M-A-I-N.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL20 for 20% off. And if you'd rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen & Main stores in select states. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward is, well, pretty obviously, Rico Dowdle setting the Carolina Panthers franchise record for yards from scrimmage in a single game with 239 yards, breaking Christian McCaffrey's record. Dowdle last week had 206 yards rushing. That's second most in franchise history in a single game. He called a shot. He told Brian Schottenheimer and the entire Dallas Cowboys organization to buckle up. Came out here, got the job done for a second week in a row. He has been tremendous in the backfield as the lead back with Chuba Hubbard out, and I continue to believe that he will be a big part of this offense whenever Chuba comes back, and was a big signing for Carolina this past offseason when the focus was on defense. They went out there and they got themselves a hell of a back in Rico Dowdle. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning, and just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Carolina Panthers are 500 for the first time since week 10 of the 2021 season. That's when they beat Arizona. Cam Newton was back in Carolina. Unfortunately, things did not end the way everyone was hoping they would that season upon Cam's return. By the way, Cam has had his number retired last night at Auburn. So congrats to Cam Newton, who is a Panthers legend, someone who eventually one day will have his name up there and the Ring of Honor here at Bank of America Stadium. But the Panthers offense got the job done on Sunday against Dallas, and so did the Panthers defense. And you got to look at it in certain aspects. Yes, there was issues against the pass. We'll talk about that momentarily. But the way they have been able to stand tall against the run recently is something I really did not expect to see this season. I felt like they would be better against the run just simply by having Derek Brown back, but also by having Bobby Brown III come over from the Rams, having Turk Wharton come back, and then also or come in here to Carolina and have A'Shawn Robinson. They had four guys you could look at and say, all right, they should be able to help out when it comes to stopping the run. You have one of the best run stoppers in the NFL in number 95 in Derek Brown, but those other three guys should be a lot better than what you had last year when it really was just A'Shawn Robinson in those final 16 games without Derek Brown. And the linebacker play has gotten a little bit better with Trevin Wallace now wearing the green dot and calling out all the plays. He's played well in that role. Christian Roseboom, I thought, had a fine enough game today, but the defensive line was going to be a big part of it. And those guys have really played well the last couple of weeks. And that's even been without Turk Wharton. And I talked to Nick Scott, the Panthers starting safety, after the game and just asked him, hey, man, like 19 yards last week, 31 this week. What happened? Because last year you started off or ended the season with 6 straight games where you allowed 200 yards rushing. Then you went out there week 1, did the same thing against Jacksonville. And since then, it's totally switched up. When you faced Arizona back when they still had James Conner and was healthy, he didn't do anything crazy. Bijan Robinson didn't do anything crazy here a couple weeks ago. And then what you've done the last 2 weeks against Miami and against Dallas, a lot of credit to that defense. And he said it was about them getting healthier. You didn't have Shaw Smith-Wade last week. You didn't have Turk Wharton this week or last week. Maybe they're just playing better and it's finally figuring itself out in a Jero Avero's scheme. I don't know what it is, but they face off against the number one rushing offense according to total rush EPA in the NFL in the Dallas Cowboys. You held them to 31 yards and 1.6 yards per carry. You look at rushing success rate, according to our friends over at True Media, 11.1%. And that is when you're measuring on first down 1st and 10, if they run the ball, you got to get 50% of that yardage. So you're getting 5 yards. You saw Rico Dowdle do that a ton today. Carolina had like a 62% rushing success rate. Then when it's 3rd and 1, you got to get that 1 yard for it to be a successful run. It's not otherwise. So Dallas, they weren't doing that. They weren't breaking off big runs. Javonte Williams did not have a great day. The offensive line for the Cowboys, which I understand has been banged up, they got manhandled by Derek Brown and company. So a ton of credit to what the run defense has been in recent weeks, whether it's been the defensive line, it's been Trevin Wallace at the linebacker spot, or it's been Trevon Merrick, who played big nickel a lot last week and then playing out there at safety today. They have been awesome. And everything that you need to win in this league. Because J.C. Horn said it multiple times last year. If you can't stop the run in this league, you can't stop anything. And they've been stopping the run. And even if the pass was a struggle for them at points of times, they were able to get the job done. And they also found a way to finish, man. 2nd week in a row where defensively, maybe they left you wanting in certain situations. Last week, it was sudden change, giving up 14 points off of those terrible Bryce Young turnovers, but then 5 straight drives where they forced the Dolphins to punt. And then, yes, they gave up that touchdown, Mike Jackson getting beat by Jalen Waddle. But then the next time out there, after Carolina had gone back there and taken the lead, they were able to get that 3 and out and get the sack there from Pat Jones II. And that was huge for that to happen. And again, today, and Dave Canales said after the game, it's about how you finish. And the way this defense finished today is all that really matters to me at the end of the day. They're able to force Dallas to a field goal that tied the game at 27-27 instead of it being a situation where Dallas scored another touchdown. Carolina's got to then go down and score a touchdown to take the lead. Nope, they held them to a field goal, 27-27. Then they got the big 3 and out. And that was the last time Dallas saw the ball again, as Carolina was able to lean on Rico Dowdle, run the clock down, and make the big 4th down play there with Bryce Young finding Hunter Renfrow, find another 1st down where Dallas had to exhaust all their timeouts, and then Ryan Fitzgerald going out there and walking it off. I also believe that's the first time I mentioned Ryan Fitzgerald kicking that field goal. Great job by him. 55-yarder earlier in the game, 33-yarder, which is basically an extra point to win the game today. He's been awesome for Carolina. He's bouncing back after a rough couple weeks ago, back up in New England. But yeah, I thought they would find a way to finish yet again, and that's what's important. It's not, we've heard it all the time. It's not about how you start, it's how you finish. And certainly with the Panthers defense in this game, where I did not expect them to play well defensively, like them holding Dallas to 31 yards on the ground, that certainly I did not expect. And I expected that Dak would have plenty of success through the air, but to be able to force 3 punts in this game, and they only gave up 3 touchdowns to Dallas, I'll take that. They got it done. So a ton of credit to the Panthers defense for the 2nd week in a row for being able to finish this game and give the offense a position to go out there, then to truly go out there and close it last week, just running the clock out. This week, be able to run out the clock and then kick that field goal to walk off and win this game. And a big question I saw, and speaking of just the way that the pass defense was today, it wasn't great. And I understand that. And a big issue was George Pickens, who looks like he's going to make a lot of money in Dallas, and we'll see how that works out for Jerry Jones and the Cowboys next year once they have emboldened him with the almighty dollar sign. But good for George Pickens, because that dude is an outstanding talent. He had 9 receptions for 168 yards and a touchdown today. And I know a lot of people have wanted to see J.C. Horn travel with the best receiver. And very clearly, George Pickens, when CeeDee Lamb's not out there, is the best receiver for Dallas and the only real threat that they have. And Ejiro Evero just does not have J.C. Horn do that. He likes J.C. on the boundary side, so the short side of the field, where he likes Mike Jackson on the field side where there's more space. Why that is, why he doesn't want to switch it up, that's his scheme. So you don't have to accept it. That just seems to be the reality of the situation. I know Sheena Quick had asked him back during training camp, might we see J.C. Horn travel with the best receiver this season? And he said, we'll see about that. We'll be seeing about it. We're 6 weeks into this thing, and George Pickens was dicing him up, and we didn't see him at all travel with him. So there was times like George Pickens had that 45-yard catch and run where he hurled a defender in the first half. That was JC on him. So, I mean, JC also, I think, got called for like a hold on that play, and he didn't hold enough because George Pickens made the play. And then the touchdown that George Pickens had on that slant route, he beat Mike Jack, and there was no one back there to catch him after that. So Mike Jackson's got to be better. As simple as that. Teams can see how Carolina schemes things up and that they're not going to move JC around. So that's really the argument, too, that you're going to have as a fan. And I think a reasonable person can also have that argument as well. Is like, hey, if teams already know that JC is always going to be over there, they're just not going to have their top receiver over there. And especially Dallas today without CeeDee Lamb, they can be even more discerning because they can just continuously have George Pickens line up there against Mike Jackson like he did today. So I don't really know what to tell you other than that's the scheme, and Dave Canales likes the scheme, and, well, the scheme was good enough today for them to win this game. But certainly you would like to see maybe an adjustment. Doesn't feel like that adjustment's going to come. So what needs to happen then is Mike Jackson has got to be a lot better than he was last week, and, of course, the way he was today up against George Pickens, who, I mean, tip cap, man. Guys get paid too. He's a really good player. So there's that. But the defense overall, I thought they got the job done when he needed to, and that was enough to get Carolina a victory here, 30-27 in walk-off fashion against Dallas. The officiating is not really something I like to talk about a lot, but when the Panthers win, good to have it not being an excuse. But let's talk about some of the officiating calls and also just revel in the fact that this team is 500 and they got the Jets next week, and they're in a prime position to really have this thing on the tracks heading into the second half of the season. We'll talk more about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss right now. New customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, even follow the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Carolina Panthers walk off against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday here inside Bank of America Stadium. Now 3-3, 500 on the season. First time they've been 500 since week 10 of the 2021 season. I said that when talking to Nick Scott in the locker room, and his eyebrows kind of raised up. He's like, oh, wow, did not realize it had been that long. And, of course, he's not been here for the last couple of years. He was here last year. He's been here for the first 6 weeks of this season. But it is striking to hear that stat. There's been a lot of first time since, which kind of lets you know that things are headed in the right direction for Carolina. We'll talk a little bit about that here momentarily as we sign off on the show. But I want to talk just briefly about officiating again. I don't really like talking about officiating that often. It's a 60-minute game. Not one call ends the game or wins the game, or whatever, loses the game for you. And yes, situationally, when it happens, it can obviously be pretty big. And situationally for Carolina in this game, there were some calls that went against them. In the first half, there was that pass interference call on J.C. Horn on 3rd and 11, where I'm watching the replay on the broadcast, and okay, I guess he kind of grabs out at Jake Ferguson. He didn't. I don't guess he did, but he totally whipped. He did not grab his arm, and then they threw the flag. So maybe it's more of an anticipation that he was reaching out for his arm, that they're okay, let's throw the flag. But it came late. Not that late, but it came after the play. So I didn't love that one. JC was trying to not get fined in the locker room, as he was saying that they've had officials come out there during training camp. That's a common occurrence. I'm sure all of you who have been to camp before have seen that. He said he's had officials say to him that this is an offensive league. Kind of sounds a lot like that one time, who I forget the ref was telling Cam Newton, you're not old enough to get that call. So because you play corner, you play defense, sorry, buddy, it's an offensive league. We want points. That's what the NFL wants. They want points. They want to focus on quarterbacks, TV ratings, blah, blah, blah. That's what we focus on here. We're not worried about you trying to make plays. Kind of ridiculous that is something that's bandied about by the officiating in the NFL. And I hope I don't get him in trouble, but he did say this on the record. So that's crazy that that's something that was said. So as a defender, when they're that transparent, you have to adjust. And I guess today on that play, he didn't adjust enough. And later on that drive, Dallas scored a touchdown. Instead, they would have had to punt. Or maybe they kick a field goal. I forget where they were at in the field. I mean, Brandon Aubrey can probably make it from like 80. It's crazy how good that guy is and how juiced the balls are. But that was one that certainly stood out. One that was not even debatable. This was a horrible call. Christian Roseboom was called for a roughing the passer on a 3rd and 5 that continued the Dallas drive. And then later on, I believe that's when George Pickens had the slant catch and run for a touchdown, beating Mike Jack. That was not at all a roughing the passer. He hit Dak high, but as Greg Olsen, because I had to turn it on my phone to hear what Greg Olsen was saying as he was on the call here on the Fox broadcast with Adam Amin. I had to ask, I was having to listen to just hear what he had to say. And I know that Greg's a Panther, but Greg's not going to sit here and be biased to a national audience, also knowing that Cowboys, Fox, basically the Fox's official team and the Dallas Cowboys, which is so annoying because at least in my 32 years, Dallas hasn't really done anything to be warranted all these games on all these primetime slots, America's team, blah, blah, blah. But Greg was saying, yeah, he hit him high, but there's no forcible contact to the head or neck area. And it looks like he hit his right arm, his throwing arm, and then maybe barely touched his helmet at the end on the follow through, but it wasn't like an aggressive follow through. It was he hit his arm and then maybe just barely tapped him. And of course, Dak just snitch behavior, being like, oh, ref, he touched me. Like, come on, man. That was a terrible call. And that directly helped Dallas score a touchdown. Now, play better defense, yes, but those were calls that I really didn't like. And I'm glad that Carolina won. So this is not something that people have to cling to and say the officials are the reason why Carolina lost this game. That is not the case. Carolina gets it done offensively and defensively, and of course on special teams with that 33-yard walk-off field goal. But most importantly, they're 3-3. They found a way in all 3 of their games at home to win. They have lost all 3 of their games on the road. And I asked Nick Scott, how do you guys carry over the momentum of the last 2 weeks of winning all your games at home and get it done on the week? And he said the best weeks that they've had preparation throughout the week are the games that they have won. So they need to have the same kind of preparation they had ahead of Atlanta, ahead of Miami, and ahead of Dallas this past week going into next week against the Jets. The Jets are awful. And they're also coming back from London. So that is not a team that you should be losing to, where they gave up 9 sacks at Denver this past week. They are last looking over at True Media and PFF in pressure percentage allowed. They're giving up 49.3% pressures. That's insane. Nearly half of their dropbacks, they are giving up a pressure. Now, Carolina still ain't great when it comes to getting pressure, but they should be good enough next week against that Jets offensive line and against a quarterback in Justin Fields who holds onto the ball way too long. So that is a game that the Panthers should win. And I've seen it joked about from Panther fans, from some of my friends who grew up here in Charlotte, they're Panther fans in our group chat. People don't really trust this team fully until they can demonstrate the ability to win on the road, but not just win on the road, win on the road against the New York Jets. That team is awful. This is not a get-right game next week for New York. That is a game where the Panthers should be kicking their teeth in and getting to 4-3 and being above 500 for the first time since, week 5 of 2021? Like another since win kind of game that you have next week in a good way for the Panthers against the Jets. And if they can win that game, which I very much am expecting them to beat the Jets. I did not go in the last 2 weeks expecting them to win these games against Miami and Dallas. Certainly felt like they had a great opportunity to beat the Cowboys because Cowboys defense is not good and that the Miami Dolphins are a disaster, and they got those games. They got the job done. Didn't look pretty against Miami for a large portion of that game, but they got it done. And against this game on Sunday against Dallas, back and forth, they got it done. They're 3-3. That's all that matters. Next week, no excuses. No excuses at all to lose to the Jets. Seriously, none. So we'll see how that plays out. But really, in my mind, this should be a 4-3 football team. And then it comes down to the litmus test here at home against Buffalo, where we know, much like today, there will be a disgusting amount of Buffalo Bills fans in this stands. And then after that, it's at Green Bay. So we'll find out even more about this team then. But right now, to this point, who is this Carolina Panthers team? It's a team that can stop the run. It's a team that has a quarterback who can get you down the field when you need it most in the fourth quarter and seal the game. He has a defense that also, even if they give up yardage, they give up big plays, they can end it when you need them to. They're going to fight their ass off. That's what Dave Canales' Panthers so far in 2025 have done. Hasn't looked great at certain points of times, like the first 6 quarters of the season. It looked good for the next 6 quarters. Looked bad in New England, but it's looked not too bad over the last 2 weeks, aside from the early turnovers last week that Bryce Young had against Miami. So I'm liking what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing a competent football team, and they're finally getting just to a level. The water's finally leveling off. They've been underwater, drowning for a number of years here since David Tepper took over the team, but now it kind of feels like maybe finally they're playing respectable football and that you don't have to worry about massive letdowns. We'll find out next week against the Jets, of course, but this seems like a football team that maybe we can start trusting moving forward. Still, want to wait to the Jets game, see how that plays out before making any bold proclamations about this team. But right now, feel good about the Carolina Panthers. You should feel good about the Carolina Panthers. Back-to-back weeks that they win, back-to-back weeks that you get to go to work on Monday, smiling, happy, and feel good about your team throughout the week and having full belief that they can win that game next Sunday in the Meadowlands against the Jets. The Panthers are 3-3. They're 500 for the first time since week 10 of 2021, and it's a great day to be a Panther fan. So enjoy it, celebrate it, and we'll talk more about it all throughout the week, about this game and also about what's coming up next week against the Jets. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where I'm answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions once again. At me or DM me on both of those outlets, and I will hit you up or answer your questions rather on Wednesday for the show. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll be back with y'all on Tuesday looking at the good, the bad, and not so ugly of the Carolina Panthers win today against Dallas. Also, we'll reflect on what Dave Canales had to say and review the 3 keys of victory, which I think they did a pretty damn good job. We'll talk about all that here on Locked On Panthers on Tuesday.